Hello again and welcome back to our course on Word 2019. We're all the way down to alignment options. Now, in the previous module, we were looking at character options, so how you can change the formatting of certain characters. And now we're going to move on to taking a look at formatting entire paragraphs. So the first thing that you'll notice is that we're back in our flyer here, our Smith flyer. And you'll also notice that there's currently no formatting applied to this document, so everything is left aligned. Now, one thing you will notice with left aligned documents, or the text within left aligned documents, is that the text will actually wrap around, so you'll never get a broken word at the end of the line. It will just put it straight down onto the next line. You also won't see anything like hyphenations in there as well, so just be aware of that. Now, the most obvious piece of formatting that we might want to do here would be to take this title and center it on the page. So I'm going to select my title by hovering my mouse over in that margin and just clicking once. And then I'm going to jump up to my paragraph group on the home ribbon. And you'll see that you have your alignment options just here. So currently we have left align applied. We also have center and right align. There's also another one here called justify. Now what that will do is it will center everything evenly on the page. So it will make sure that the margins on the left and the margins on the right, the text goes up to the end of each of them. So you kind of see this in newspaper print as well. So if that means that Word has to space out a word a little bit more, then it will do that in order to make your text aligned on both edges. So that's what justify is. So just be aware of that. So I'm going to actually center this title, so I'm going to click on the center align button, and you can see there's also a keyboard shortcut of Control E. And there we go, centered in the middle of the page. And of course, if I wanted to just realign that back to the left, I can choose the left align button. I'm actually just going to pop that back in the center. So let's have a look at what happens if we right align. So for this, I'm going to select all of the text in the document. So I'm going to do the Control A shortcut to select everything. And then we're going to click right align. And you can now see that everything is lined up on the right hand side, but not on the left. Let's select all of our text again. So Control A. And let's take a look at that justify that I was just talking about earlier. So if I click justify, you can see now, if you look at these sentences, particularly these first two paragraphs where the text wraps around, they're aligned both on the right-hand side and also on the left-hand side. So Word's gone and put in some extra spacing just to get that to work out correctly. So that's what justify does. So with regards to aligning paragraphs, that's really all you need to know. There's just those 4 buttons in that paragraph group on the home ribbon. Let's now move on to taking a look at how line spacing works, so I will see you in the next module. Hello again and welcome back to our course on Word 2019. We're now down to module 4.2 on line spacing. Now, when we talk about line spacing, it's fairly obvious we mean the amount of space that we have between each line of text. And if I give you a quick example here, so I just have a blank document, I'm just going to type in the word draft and hit enter. Now you'll see that when I hit enter, the cursor doesn't appear directly under the word draft, it appears a little way down, so there is a small gap in there. And that was developed mainly because a lot of the time people didn't want to type directly under the text above. If you imagine a title, you normally want a little bit of space in there. So what you'll find, the default in Word nowadays is to have a little bit of a gap in there. And of course you can adjust it, which is what we're going to look at in this module. Now, how can you tell what line spacing you currently have applied? Well, if you jump up to that paragraph group again, you'll see that there is a button right in the middle there called Line and Paragraph Spacing. And there's a drop-down arrow, so let's click it and see what we have in there. And you can see here currently, it's not showing me any line spacing. Now if I click next to Draft, where we have that, and go back to the same button, click the drop-down, and you can see that I have my line spacing here set to 1.15. And I can tell that because it's got the tick next to it. So I could change it to whatever I wanted to if I wasn't particularly happy with that amount of line spacing. You can also see at the bottom, because we have this option here, remove space after paragraph, that's also another indicator that there is some line spacing in there. Now, let me illustrate this a little bit better by using our Smith Flyer document. So I'm going to jump back to it using Switch Windows. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start by highlighting the entire document. So Control A again. I'm going to go up to my paragraphs. And I can choose any of these, and as I hover over them, you'll see how that line spacing changes. So it gets wider as we go down. Now, in general, 1.15 is a little bit easier for people to read than something like 1, which is a bit too close together. So if this is quite a long document and people are going to be reading it, then 1.15 is actually a really nice line spacing, but you could increase that if you wanted to. It's entirely up to you. Now, I had my whole document selected there, which is why everything is changing. But if I was just interested in changing the line spacing on a specific paragraph, again, just make the correct selection before you go in and change that line spacing. Now, one more thing I want to show you in here, and I'm just going to click my mouse at the end of the title. I'm going to go back up into that line spacing drop down, and this time we're going to go to line spacing options. And you'll see I get this little dialog box pop up. And the third little group here is the spacing group. And this is where you can really get quite granular as to how much space you actually want before or after the text. So currently mine's set to 0. My line spacing is set to multiple, and you can see there is that 1.15 that I set it to. But I could go in and change it to single line spacing. I could change it to 1.5 lines, and you can see in the preview at the bottom what that's going to look like. So double line spacing is a bit wider. I could say at least, and then I can adjust how much space I want in there. So you really can set this to however you want it to look. Now, one handy little button in here, if you've come into here and you've set up all your settings, set your spacing how you want it to be for all of your documents, you can choose to set it as a default. And it will then ask you if you just want to set it as the default spacing for this document only, or all documents based on the normal .m template. So that's entirely up to you. I'm just going to cancel out of there. So just remember that if you do set it for all documents, every time you create a new document, you'll get whatever line spacing you've set in this area below. So that's really all there is to line spacing. So it's definitely worth having a little play around with. And as I said, again, if you want to use the same line spacing in every single document, come into here, set it, and then set it as default. In the next module, we're going to talk a little bit about working with indents. So I'll see you over there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Word 2019. This is Deb, and I'm back with you to talk about working with indents in your document. Now, in the previous modules, we've been talking a lot about options for formatting paragraphs, and it might be that when you have a document such as this one, that you might want to indent the left side of a paragraph. Now, you could use the tab key for things like this, but it will only indent the first line. What I'm talking about is indenting the entire paragraph. And for that, we can use these little indent markers that we have up here on the ruler. So now that I've tabbed that first line, if you look at this little indent marker just here, you can see it's moved it along ½ an inch. Now, maybe I don't want it to be ½ an inch, or maybe I want to indent the whole paragraph. How might I do that? Because I can't use the tab key to do that. Well, I can utilize these little buttons or icons, whatever you want to call them, on the ruler at the top here, and work with those to set my paragraphs or my indent spacing just as I want it to be set. Let me just backspace out of there. So let's take a look at what these little buttons do. Now, if you hover over them, and I'm going to hover over this top one here, the downward facing triangle, you'll see that it says first line indent. And what that means is that this little button controls just the first line of your paragraph. Now, in fact, a step that I've just forgotten to do is I'm going to highlight the paragraphs that I want this to affect first of all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this first paragraph just here. I'm going to go up to my ruler, I'm going to grab my first line indent and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag it. I'm going to drag it to 3/4 of an inch and let go. And you can see because it's the first line indent, it's only moved that first line. So it works similar to the tab that we did before, but this time I'm able to define how large that indent is. Remember, tab will automatically only allow you to tab 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to undo that by clicking my undo button. And let's now look at the one below that on the ruler. So we've looked at the first line indent. The one below, the little upwards pointing triangle, is a hanging indent. So let's drag that across and see what that does. As you can see, it moves basically everything except that first line. So it's almost like a reverse of the first line indent. Now, can you think of any examples of a hanging indent? How about numbers? We looked at numbers in a previous module, and let me just show you what I mean by that. I'm just going to switch to a blank document. If you remember in one of the previous modules, we had a list of 4 or so names. So let me just type those in again. So there was Adam, there was Deborah, there was Mish, and we'll say Rob. And I'm going to apply some numbering to these names. So I'm going to go to my home ribbon and I'm going to select just the basic numbering. Now look at my ruler. You can see what it's done here. The first line indent has moved out, and so has the hanging indent as well. So again, I could use these to adjust the way my numbered list is displayed. So maybe I've decided that these 4 names are a bit too close to the numbers. I could grab the hanging indent and I could drag it out and move those further away. The same thing for the numbers. Those are set to the first line indent. I could drag that and I could drag them in or out to adjust those. Okay, so that's an example of indents in use in your document, and Word does that automatically when you apply numbering. Let's switch back to our flyer that we're working on. Now the other thing that we have here is this little box on the bottom. So where we have that upward pointing triangle or the hanging indent, underneath there's something called a left indent, and it's the little square or rectangle, whatever that is. And if I drag that, it's going to drag the whole lot. So if I just undo a couple of times so you can see this a little bit better and just grab the left indent, it moves the entire paragraph across. Okay. Now you also have a corresponding one of those on the right hand side of the document as well. So I have a right indent. So again, I can grab it and I can drag in. And remember, these changes are only affecting the paragraph that you have selected. So if you wanted to do it for the entire document, you just press Ctrl A and then drag your indents in and out. So that's a very quick overview of how to use those indents on your ruler. The next thing I want to talk to you about is working with tabs. So I will see you in the next module. Hi everyone, and welcome back to our course on Word 2019. We're now down in section 4 and we're going to start talking a little bit more about the use of tabs in your documents. And this is a really good feature in Microsoft Word. And what a tab actually is, it means that when you hit the tab key, it will essentially allow you to override the default tab spacing of 1/2 inch. As we've seen previously, if I just click my mouse on the top of this document, if I press my tab key, it's going to tab me across 1/2 inch each time. So with tabs, you can set them to whatever distance you want, and you can also change the kind of tab that you're using in your document as well. So if you just look at this example that I have here, I just have a blank document open and I have a little, what looks like a table. All of my information is nicely in columns and everything looks nice and lined up. Now you might think that this is in fact a table. It's actually not. I created this purely using tabs. And if you turn on your show hide paragraph markers, which we looked at in a previous module, you can see all of the tabs in there. So wherever we have a little arrow, that's where we have tabs. Now I'm going to turn that back off and let's start looking at how you can set tabs in a document. Now you might be wondering, where are my tabs? Well, they're actually quite hard to see if you don't know where they are. If you look up at the ruler and cast your eyes off to the left-hand side, you'll see this very small little sort of back to front L just here. It's just below the quick access toolbar. And if you hover your mouse over, you'll see it says Right tab. If I click on it, it moves to the next tab, which is a decimal tab. So let me explain what these are. The first two are left and right tabs, so they will allow you to align your text to the left or to the right. The decimal tab allows you to line up via the decimal point. So if you have numbers in a document, you can set that tab so that all of those decimal points are in line. You then have a bar tab, which you will sometimes see used in CVs or resumes. So if you've ever seen a resume that has kind of a line running down the middle and there's information on both sides, that's normally created using a bar tab. And we then have indents again. So our first line indent, that's exactly the same as the one which we were looking at on the ruler. And if I click once more, we have our hanging indent as well. And then if I click again, we're back to left tab. So they essentially cycle round. So you can just click on them to move through and then pick the tab that you want to use in your document. So let me just show you very briefly how these work. So with my left tab selected, I'm going to go over to the ruler and I'm just going to click where I want to drop that tab. So let's say I want to drop it at 1.5 inches. I'm going to click and there you can see that little L. So now when I press my tab key, it's going to jump me straight across directly underneath where I've set that tab, and I can then type my text. Same thing, if I go to the next line by hitting enter, press tab, and I'll be directly underneath the line above. So nice and simple. Now if you want to remove a tab, it's a simple case of just dragging it off of the ruler. So I'm going to click, I'm just going to drag it off the ruler. And I'm going to delete out this text that I've already put in here. So let's now cycle through some of the other tabs and explore what they do. So I'm going to go back to my little tab indicator. I'm going to click once and I've now changed it to a decimal tab. So now I have that selected. I'm going to go onto my ruler. I'm just going to drop this at 1.5 inches as well by clicking on the ruler. I'm going to tab across. And I'm going to type a number this time that has a decimal point. And you'll see that the decimal point is directly underneath where we have that decimal tab. So everything's going to line up if it's got a decimal point in it. So if I was to do 65.978, you can see whilst these numbers aren't in line, those decimal points are. Let's delete that out and get rid of our tab by dragging it off the ruler. Let's go back and cycle to the next one, which is the bar tab. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put that bar tab at 2.5 inches like so. And you can see it gives me a little line in there. So I can type some text, I can press tab, and I can go the other side. As I said, you might see this in things like resumes where you have your personal details on one side and then maybe your education, previous employment on the other. So a bar tab is useful for that kind of thing. Let's delete out and cycle to our next tab. Now these two, we've already looked at these. These are the indents and we looked at those in the previous module. So I'm going to skip over those indents for the time being. And this time we're going to cycle to the center tab. So again, let's just put this at 2.5, click on the ruler. I'm going to type my name again. And you can see that it's perfectly centered underneath that tab. Let's drag that tab off and delete. And the final one that we're going to look at is the right align tab. Now with this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this all the way at the end of the ruler. So sort of by where we've got number 6 on the ruler, and click. And now when I press tab, you'll see my cursor jumps all the way over to that right hand side. And as I start typing, my characters print to the left so that everything is lined up nicely on the right hand side. So those are the different tabs that you can use in your document, and which ones you use really depend on what you're trying to line up. Now again, let me just delete that out and just drag that tab off the ruler. So in this table that I already have created, if I click within it, you can see the tabs that I have set up for these columns down here. So if you look at the ruler, you can see that I have a left tab set up there and all of the addresses are aligned to the left. For the amount column, I have a decimal tab set up, so everything is in line with the decimal points. And then finally in the last column here, I have a right tab set up, so everything's in line on the right hand side. So that's how I've constructed this little table down here, or this columns of information. So now what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to recreate this little table that we have below in the top half of this document. So I'm going to set up my tabs first of all. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the left tab. So I'm going to cycle through and I'm going to drop that tab roughly there. I'm then going to pick up my decimal tab. And I'm going to drop that just about there. And then finally, I'm going to pick up my right tab. And I'm going to drop that right at the end of the document. So I have my tabs set up on my ruler. Now I'm just going to recreate the information that we have below. So I'm going to type in name, I'm going to press my tab key and it moves across to that first tab. Press my tab key again. I'm going to hit enter and then I'm going to type in Adam Lacey, 123 Elm Street, and we're going to say $25. Oops. And telephone 555-8967. And hit enter. And I'm just going to do a few of these. So we've got 456 Oak Lane. We have 1450 tab, and then the phone number 645-9867. Let's just do two. So hopefully you can see from that how I created that table below. And of course, if you're not happy where the tabs currently are or the way the document's looking, you can just drag and drop these tabs to move them either left or right. Now, the final thing I want to discuss here is something called tab leaders. And that may not be a term that you've ever heard of before, but if you think of it in this way, if you've ever looked at a table of contents in a book or in a document or a manual, quite often you'll have the page number and then you'll have ... and then maybe the title of the chapter or the title of the topic or something like that. And that's basically what a tab leader is, those dots. I'm going to show you how you can add those on when you set up your tabs. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all of the text where I want tab leaders. So I'm going to leave out the column headings. And there are a couple of different ways you can get to tabs. You can either double click on any tab stop that you have on the ruler. So I could double click here and it will take me into my tab box. Or if I just click cancel there, in the paragraph group, if you click this little drop down arrow, you have a tabs button at the bottom of this box and that will take you to exactly the same place. Now what you'll see in here are all the tabs that you currently have set up for the selected area. So you can see here I have tabs at 2 inches, 4.25 and 6.13. And currently I don't have any leaders set. So you can see at the bottom here we have leader and currently it's set to none. So I'm going to set a leader. Now what you need to do is you need to select your first tab stop. So mine is the one at 2 inches. And I can choose a style of leader. So I can have dots, I can have dashes, or I can have a solid horizontal line. Now I'm going to use dots. So I'm going to click on number 2. And you have to click on set. Very important and very easy to forget. Let's click on set. And you have to do the same thing for each of the tabs that you have. So I'm going to go to 4.25. I'm going to select the dots and click Set. And then finally 6.13 and Set. And click on OK. And there you go. You'll see I get my leaders in between my columns. So that's lovely if you're doing something like a table of contents. It just adds a really professional edge. So hopefully that's given you more of an idea as to how you can set up different types of tab stops on your ruler, and also how you can add those leaders in there as well. We've made it all the way to the end of section 4 now, so all that's left for you to do is a quick practice exercise before we move on to managing and sorting lists in section 5. So I will see you over there. Hello everyone and welcome back to our course on Word 2019. We're now down to section 4 practice exercise, and this is where I want you to practice some of the skills that we've learnt in relation to paragraph formatting. So the first thing I'd like you to do for me is to open the file called Module Practice 4. I'd then like you to go in and change the line spacing for the entire document to 1.0 and no space after the Enter key. I'd then like you to center the title on the page and then indent the first paragraph at 0.75 inches on the left and 5.25 inches on the right. I'd then like you to place a right align tab at 6 inches and move the date over to that tab. Once you've done all that, you can save and close the file. Great job, everyone. It looks like you are ready for the next section, so I will see you over there.